Mrs. Carmen, one of the wealthiest women in the country, had always worried about how her children would handle their inheritance. Knowing her time was nearing, she prepared a special surprise for the reading of the will. Her goal was to ensure that her children wouldn't be driven solely by interest in the division of her assets. When she passed away, her children were extremely eager to receive the inheritance, but they never imagined that Mrs. Carmen was several steps ahead of them. On that autumn morning, Mrs. Carmen's mansion stood tall against the gray sky. The three children, Roberto, Sonia, and Larissa, waited in the living room, where time seemed to have stopped since their mother's departure. The antique furniture and heavy curtains were witnesses to a life of luxury and countless stories, now silent in the absence of the matriarch. Roberto, the eldest, a determined businessman, stood impatiently by the window, his hands in the pockets of his impeccable suit. He was visibly irritated by the wait. "I hope old Estevao gets here soon. I have more important things to do than sit around here," Roberto said impatiently. Sonia, the middle sibling and a renowned lawyer, glanced up from the document she was reviewing and cast a critical look at Roberto. Roberto, Mom wasn't just about money. She always valued justice and fairness. "We're here to make sure her wishes are respected," Sonia replied firmly. Larissa, the youngest of the three, remained quiet on the sofa, watching the exchange between her siblings. Her brown eyes reflected a contained sadness, but also a serene determination. Unlike the other two, she inherited not only her mother's compassion, but also a more detached view of material wealth. Before Roberto could respond to Sonia's reprimand, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with white hair and a serious posture. It was Mr. Estevao, Mrs. Carmen's trusted lawyer for over 3 decades. He carried a worn leather briefcase and looked at the three siblings with a mix of respect and sadness. "My deepest condolences for the loss of Mrs. Carmen," Mr. Estevao said with a grave and serene voice. "She was a remarkable woman, and I'm very sorry for her passing." The three children nodded in silence, each absorbing the lawyer's words in their own way. "Let's get straight to the point, Mr. Estevao," Roberto interrupted, clearly impatient. "What's in the will? How much money are we talking about here?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses and took a deep breath before responding. Mrs. Carmen left very clear instructions about how she wanted her inheritance to be distributed. "Please, sit down, everyone, let's talk." Mr. Estevao was there, in the living room of Mrs. Carmen's house, with a serious air. He held an old-looking leather folder, as if it contained something very important. In the room, the three children of Mrs. Carmen sat attentively while Mr. Estevao began to talk about her will. "My dear heirs," Mr. Estevao began, his deep voice echoing through the quiet room, "we're here to read Mrs. Carmen's last will and testament." He looked at each of them, noticing the mix of anticipation and tension on their faces. The moment seemed to weigh heavily in the air. Roberto, who had always been somewhat impatient, couldn't stay quiet any longer and quickly asked, "Let's get to the point. How much is each of us getting?" His voice showed a bit of anxiety, but also a certain authority. Mr. Estevao raised his hand, signaling for calm, and with a firm look said, "It's not that simple. Your mother's will includes a few special conditions." Sonia, the middle child, quickly glanced at Larissa, the youngest. While Roberto was visibly impatient, Larissa seemed quite calm. Sonia then returned her gaze to the lawyer, already imagining what those conditions might mean. "What exactly do you mean by that, Mr. Estevao?" Sonia asked with a firm voice, like a lawyer accustomed to unraveling legal mysteries. Mr. Estevao adjusted his glasses on his nose and explained slowly. Mrs. Carmen had a very special idea about how her fortune should be distributed. She didn't only think about material assets, but also about how each of you can make a difference in the world. All of this will be explained soon. He flipped through some papers as he spoke. "We're ready to hear," Larissa said, breaking the silence and looking at her siblings. They exchanged glances, somewhat confused. The lawyer then began to read what Mrs. Carmen had written. "My dear children," the letter said, "if you are reading this, it is because I have already said goodbye to this life. I know you all expect a fair division of my fortune, but I have one last wish that must be fulfilled." Roberto interrupted again. What does she mean by that? Mr. Estevao, maintaining his composure, replied, If you'll allow me to continue, Mr. Roberto, everything will become clear. Larissa placed her hand on Roberto's arm, trying to calm him. Let him speak, Roberto. We need to respect Mom's wishes. Sonia nodded, although she looked worried. She thought, Mom always had her reasons. Let's hear the rest. The lawyer cleared his throat and continued reading. My fortune will not be divided so easily. You will have to prove your worth by facing 2 challenges that I have prepared. Only those who overcome both challenges will receive the inheritance. After the surprising revelation of the will, silence took over the room. It seemed that everyone was at a loss for words. Sonia was the first to break the heavy mood. The 3 siblings looked at each other, completely confused. Roberto, clearly impatient, was the first to speak again. Challenges? What kind of idea is that? Mom always complicated everything. What does she mean by challenges? Sonia asked, her voice a bit shaky. She can't be serious, can she, Mr. Estevao? Larissa asked, raising an eyebrow, thoughtful. Yes, it is quite strange, replied the lawyer in a serious tone. But I'm afraid your mother's instructions were very clear and mandatory. She set up 2 challenges that will determine who will inherit her fortune. Roberto slammed his hand on the table, his face turning red with anger. This is ridiculous. I want my share of the inheritance now. Calm down, Roberto, Mr. Estevao said firmly. If you want the inheritance, you'll have to fulfill your mother's wishes. Roberto scoffed, clearly displeased. This is absurd. Mom was always complicated, but this is too much. Larissa looked at her own hands, silently absorbing the gravity of her mother's demands. She had always known that Mrs. Carmen had high expectations, but this surpassed anything she could have imagined. I wasn't expecting this, Sonia admitted, looking at the lawyer with a mix of uncertainty and determination. But if this is what Mom wanted, then we need to consider it. Mr. Estevao nodded. You have time to think and decide how to proceed. I will provide more details about the challenges and the deadlines involved. Please understand that these are Mrs. Carmen's final wishes and must be respected. The silence that followed was no longer just one of shock, but laden with understanding. Everyone knew that their lives were about to change in unpredictable ways. The fate of their fortunes would not be decided merely by money, but by the challenges they would have to face. Challenges that would test not only their skills, but also who they truly were. Larissa, who was usually the calmest of the 3, looked at the lawyer with a confused and worried expression. What exactly are these challenges? She asked. The lawyer cleared his throat before continuing. The first challenge will take place in a dark room. Inside, there will be 3 identical boxes. One contains a key, another a venomous scorpion, and the third a poisonous snake. A shiver ran down Larissa's spine as she heard these words. Roberto and Sonia exchanged worried glances. Each of you must choose and open a box, Mr. Estevao continued. Whoever finds the key will proceed to the second challenge. Roberto, unable to contain himself, shouted, This is madness. Mom went crazy before she died. Sonia, however, looked firmly at the lawyer, her eyes filled with anxiety, but also with determination. Mr. Estevao, this is very dangerous. We can't just agree without understanding all the consequences. The lawyer, understanding, nodded. I know it's hard to accept, but these are the instructions left by Dona Carmen. She believed that by facing real challenges, you could prove your true worth. Despite the evident nervousness, Larissa managed to stay calm. What if no one finds the key? She asked, while Mr. Estevao calm responded, Then you will fail the first challenge and won't be able to advance to the second. Roberto was clearly unsettled, but Larissa placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to convey a calm she herself barely felt. We need to think clearly and act cautiously. This is a unique opportunity that Mom left us. Sonia took a deep breath, struggling to reconcile her mother's wishes with the sense of responsibility she felt. All right, we need to fully understand what is at stake before making any decisions. And if we choose the wrong boxes, she asked, fear evident in her eyes. The lawyer shrugged in a grim gesture. Well, then you'll have to deal with the consequences. A heavy silence filled the room until Larissa, with a voice full of determination, broke the ice. "Very well. If these are Mom's wishes, we will do as she said. Whatever the challenges, I will overcome them and claim what is rightfully mine." Sonia, though reluctant, agreed, while Larissa remained silent, thoughtful. Why did her late mother have more behind these plans? Mr. Estevao got up from his chair, adjusting his glasses. "It is important that you understand the seriousness of these challenges. Dona Carmen did not make this decision without a reason." Finally, Larissa spoke, her calm voice contrasting with the tension in the air. "Mr. Estevao, you said the boxes are in a dark room. How will we know which one to choose?" The lawyer smiled, appreciating the young woman's question. "Each of you will receive a flashlight. The boxes will be arranged randomly, and you will have to rely on your instincts." Roberto let out an impatient sigh. "Let's get this over with. How much time do we have to decide?" "You have until the end of this week to make your choices," replied Mr. Estevao. "I will be here to guide you, but the final decision will be up to each of you." Sonia looked at her siblings, mixing concern with determination. "We need to prepare. This is not something to be taken lightly," said Larissa, already thinking about how to tackle the first challenge. "I agree with Sonia. We need to analyze all the options before making any decision," she added. The lawyer looked at the three siblings with respect. "Remember, it's not just an inheritance at stake. It's a chance to honor your mother's legacy." The ensuing silence was profound, as everyone understood their lives were about to change in ways they had never imagined. The inheritance issue would not be resolved merely by a simple will, but through challenges that would test their emotions and physical strength. Mr. Estevao looked at the siblings with a mix of respect and compassion. "You have time to reflect on this," he said. "I will be here to answer any questions and guide you through the next steps." The three siblings looked at each other, each lost in their own thoughts, trying to grasp the magnitude of the choices they would have to make. Then they united in a decision. "We accept," they said, with Roberto taking the lead. "We can start the first challenge tomorrow." After making the shocking decision to face the dangerous challenges, they gathered in a secluded corner of the mansion, away from Mr. Estevao's and Larissa's attentive ears. "We can't let Larissa win this inheritance," Roberto whispered, worried. "You know how she is. She'll donate everything to charity without a second thought." His eyes sparkled with determination. "I agree, brother," Sonia said. "She has no idea how to handle so much money. Mom's fortune would be in better hands if it stayed with us." Roberto agreed. "We need to find a way to turn these challenges to our advantage." Sonia looked around, making sure they were indeed alone. "What do you suggest we do? How can we ensure this?" Roberto smiled calculatingly. "Let's make her choose the wrong box in the first challenge. We know she trusts her instincts too much. We can use that against her." Sonia frowned, worried. "That sounds risky. What if it goes wrong?" Roberto raised an eyebrow. "If we don't try, Larissa might end up leaving us with nothing. We need to act before it's too late." As the siblings conspired, Larissa watched them from afar, feeling a growing distrust in her heart. She had always known Roberto and Sonia were ambitious, but she never imagined they could plot against her in this way. Suddenly, Mr. Estevao approached, interrupting her thoughts. Larissa looked worried and seemed distant. The lawyer, Mr. Estevao, noticed and asked, "Larissa, are you okay? You seem a bit lost." Larissa forced a smile and replied, "I'm fine, Mr. Estevao. I'm just trying to make sense of all this." Mr. Estevao looked at her intently and said, "Remember, Larissa, these challenges are an opportunity for you to show who you really are. Don't let external pressures affect you." Larissa nodded, but she felt a discomfort that wouldn't leave her. She knew she would have to trust herself more than ever to face the challenges ahead. Meanwhile, Roberto and Sonia were planning something sinister. They wanted to manipulate the situation to their advantage. The inheritance wasn't just about facing the challenges set by Dona Carmen, but also dealing with the betrayal among siblings who claimed to be loyal but were willing to do anything to secure their share of the fortune. Roberto and Sonia were close, whispering and forming an evil plan. In the darkroom challenge, you'll try to bribe the attendant to ensure you get the box with the key, Roberto told Sonia. I'll make sure Larissa picks the box with the poisonous snake. Sonia smiled mischievously and replied, and if she survives, then we'll work together on the second challenge. Roberto winked with a malevolent glint in his eyes and said, we'll confuse and deceive Larissa until she's completely lost. The longer we take, the better our chances. The two laughed darkly, satisfied with the idea of deceiving their own sister. Meanwhile, Larissa watched from afar, sensing that something was wrong. She saw the secretive glances between Roberto and Sonia and realized that something dangerous was happening. Determined to find out more, Larissa waited for Roberto and Sonia to walk away. She then approached Mr. Estevao, who was reviewing documents in a corner of the room. Mr. Estevao, can I talk to you for a moment? Larissa asked quietly, not wanting to draw attention. The lawyer looked at her with a kind but reserved expression and replied, of course, Larissa. How can I help? Larissa hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I'm worried about the challenges Mom left us. I feel like Roberto and Sonia are planning something against me. Mr. Estevao frowned, concern in his eyes. Larissa, I feared something like this might happen. Your siblings are very ambitious when it comes to money. What can I do to help? Larissa asked, how can I ensure that the challenges are fair? Mr. Estevao gently placed his hand on her shoulder and replied, first, trust yourself. Your mother chose these challenges for a reason. They're not just about honor, courage, and true determination. Larissa felt relieved hearing the comforting words from Mr. Estevao. She knew her siblings wouldn't stop until they had defeated her, so she decided to stay alert to every move they made. Larissa responded firmly, I'll do my best to overcome the challenges. Within her, an even greater determination was growing. She knew she needed to be more vigilant than ever. Her siblings might be relentless, but she was determined to prove she deserved not just her mother's fortune, but also her respect and trust. Meanwhile, Roberto and Sonia exchanged meaningful glances, full of mutual trust. The plan was in motion, and they believed they could manipulate the challenges to their advantage. The game was just beginning, and every move counted to determine who would emerge victorious in the end. The next morning, the three siblings met again at the mansion, ready to face the first challenge. The room was dark, except for three identical boxes in the center. Mr. Estevao awaited them with a serious expression. Are you ready? Asked the lawyer, observing each of them. Roberto and Sonia looked at each other with a knowing smile, confident in their plan. Larissa, calm, simply nodded. Very well. Then follow me, said Mr. Estevao, leading them down a long corridor to a heavy wooden door. When the door opened, it revealed a small, completely dark room with the three boxes in the center. Remember, warned the lawyer, one of these boxes contains the key to the next challenge. The other two, well, you already know. A shiver ran down each of their spines as Estevao withdrew, locking the door behind him. Roberto and Sonia immediately set their plan into action. Let Sonia and I choose first, said Roberto with a false tone of kindness. We're older, so it's our responsibility. Before Larissa could respond, Sonia was already stealthily approaching one of the boxes, slipping some notes to the room's guard. He subtly nodded to indicate which box contained the key. With a nod, Sonia opened the box and pulled out a small silver key. Look, I have the key, Sonia exclaimed triumphantly. Roberto then turned to Larissa with a forced smile. Why don't you try the next one, little sister, he suggested. Larissa approached the box Roberto indicated and reached out to open it. But suddenly, the door burst open with a bang, and a familiar figure hurried in. It was Fabio, the best friend of their late mother, followed by the lawyer, Mr. Estevao. Stop everything, Fabio exclaimed. I have evidence that you're cheating. Fabio's voice echoed through the room, laden with indignation. He was holding a small camera that seemed almost invisible in his hands. From the device, a familiar voice began to echo, revealing the heart of Roberto and Sonia's plan. The recording clearly showed the two of them conspiring, laughing, and plotting how to sabotage the process to get the inheritance. Larissa, standing by, had her eyes wide open, incredulous. Shock and surprise were mixed on her face. Larissa's siblings, Roberto and Sonia, were visibly disoriented, their expressions showing they had just received an unexpected blow. Their faces were pale, and the embarrassment was palpable. The room, once filled with silent tension, was now heavy with an uncomfortable, oppressive energy. Fabio, with a severe expression, began to explain. "My mother, Donna Carmen, knew you might try something dishonest," he said, shaking his head in disillusionment. "She asked me to install hidden cameras throughout the house. The purpose of these challenges was not only to test your ability, but also to see if you were truly trustworthy." The revelation seemed to paralyze Roberto and Sonia. The ensuing silence was thick with an almost tangible embarrassment. The lawyer, Mr. Estevao, watched them with a look of contempt, as if he were witnessing something both lamentable and predictable. "It seems the inheritance will not be yours," he said coldly, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Larissa, with tears beginning to shine in her eyes, looked from one sibling to the other, her heart broken by the betrayal now before her. The pain of her siblings' disloyalty was almost unbearable, but what hurt her the most was the confirmation that her mother had been right all along. It was as if the weight of the truth had finally fallen on her shoulders. Fabio, approaching her with a look of sincere compassion, tried to comfort her. "Larissa, I am deeply sorry that you have to go through this. Your mother trusted you to act with integrity and do the right thing." Still stunned and processing the revelation, Larissa managed to murmur, "Thank you, Fabio. At least now I know the truth." Her voice was laden with a mix of relief and sadness. The lawyer, with a gesture attempting to break the tension in the air, began to speak again. "Larissa, you were the only one who demonstrated true integrity during this test. As your mother wished, the fortune will be yours." The words seemed to linger in the air for a moment as Larissa blinked, trying to absorb the enormity of the news. "And my siblings?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Mr. Estevao shook his head slowly, a gesture that seemed to carry the weight of the decision about to be announced. "According to the specific terms of Donna Carmen's will, they will have no right to the inheritance." Roberto and Sonia were left in stunned silence, as if trying to process the magnitude of their actions and the consequences they now faced. Larissa's face was a mix of relief and deep sadness. She would inherit her mother's fortune, but the betrayal by her own siblings left a bitter sense of defeat. Faced with the irrefutable evidence of betrayal, Roberto and Sonia were confronted with the harshness of the consequences. Mr. Estevao approached, his gaze filled with disappointment. "You too should be ashamed," he said, his reproach clear and firm. "Your mother trusted you to act with honor. Yet from the beginning, you plotted to deceive." Roberto, desperately trying to justify himself, made one last effort to defend his actions. "We only wanted to ensure that the inheritance went to someone who truly deserves it," he said, but the weakness in his words was evident. Sonia, with tear-filled eyes and a pleading look, turned to Fabio. "Please, there must be some mistake. We didn't mean to betray Larissa on purpose." Fabio sighed deeply, looking at the siblings with a mix of pity and disgust. "The evidence is clear, Sonia. You were caught red-handed." Donna Carmen left no room for doubt. The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of Larissa's tears as the truth settled in for everyone, marking the end of an era of illusions and betrayals. Mr. Estevao looked at the papers in his briefcase and spoke with a firm voice. He explained that, according to Donna Carmen's will, anyone who tried to manipulate the challenges would be immediately excluded from the inheritance. This meant that Roberto and Sonia would lose any claim to it. Roberto stood with clenched fists, frustration and anger boiling inside him. "This can't be happening. Larissa doesn't deserve it more than we do," he exclaimed. Fabio, with a serious expression, intervened. "Larissa has demonstrated the true essence of the values her mother cherished. She was honest and faced the challenges without trying to manipulate them." As the discussion continued in the dimly lit room, Larissa stood on the sidelines, watching with sadness and relief. She couldn't believe her siblings' greed, but also felt a pang of gratitude for being recognized for her integrity. Finally, Mr. Estevao approached Larissa with a gentle smile. Larissa, according to your mother's wishes, you are the sole beneficiary of the inheritance. Larissa nodded, silently thanking the lawyer. Roberto and Sonia were shocked, and Larissa let out a small sigh of surprise. She had never desired this fortune, but she also didn't think it was right. Desperate, Roberto protested. Larissa didn't even want the inheritance. Sonia, with tears streaming down her face, joined the protest. Please reconsider. We'll give anything for another chance. Larissa looked at her siblings with a broken heart. Part of her wanted revenge, but her sense of kindness stopped her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and said calmly, I accept the inheritance, but with one condition. Mr. Estevao and Fabio exchanged surprised glances. What would be the condition? Mr. Estevao asked. Larissa smiled slightly and responded, that my brothers have a chance to redeem themselves and prove that they can act with honesty and integrity from now on. Roberto and Sonia were still stunned by the turn of events. Fabio crossed his arms, thinking seriously about Larissa's words. How do you propose this will happen? Mr. Estevao asked, curious and skeptical. Larissa thought for a moment and explained, my brothers will have 1 year to show that they have changed. During this time, they will be closely monitored by Fabio and Mr. Estevao. If, at the end of this period, they demonstrate a genuine change in their attitudes, we can reassess the inheritance situation. Roberto protested. A year is a long time. Mr. Estevao raised his hand to silence him. The lawyer looked at Roberto and Sonia with a stern expression and said, accept this opportunity with humility if you truly want to make amends for what you have done. Sonia, with tears streaming down her face, showed a mixture of gratitude and determination. We accept, she said firmly, looking directly at Larissa. We will show that we deserve a new chance. Roberto agreed, albeit reluctantly, realizing he had no other option. Very well, he murmured. Larissa smiled in relief, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Mr. Estevao, satisfied with the decision, declared, it's settled. Fabio and I will ensure that this trial period is fair and rigorous. Fabio, placing a hand on Larissa's shoulder, said gratefully, you have shown true greatness today. As the siblings left, each lost in their own thoughts, Larissa knew the coming year would be crucial. She sincerely hoped that Roberto and Sonia could find a path to redemption, as deep down, she still wanted to believe in the family she once dreamed of being united. In the following days, Larissa took control of the vast business and fortune left by her late mother. As she adjusted to her new responsibilities, she constantly reflected on the chance for redemption she had offered her siblings. One day, while reviewing some documents in her office, there was a knock on the door. Come in, Larissa called. The door opened, and Roberto entered, hesitantly, with his eyes down and a face full of remorse. Roberto, with a mix of compassion and caution, looked at Larissa. His normally firm green eyes now showed a glimpse of vulnerability. Larissa knew this moment was important, not only for Roberto but also for the future of the family. I wanted to apologize once again for my actions during the will's challenges, Roberto murmured with a weight of regret in his words. I was consumed by greed and lost sight of what truly matters. Larissa pondered for a moment before responding, carefully measuring her words. I understand, Roberto. What happened was painful for all of us, but I believe people can change if they are genuinely willing. Roberto agreed, showing relief mixed with anxiety. I know my words may not mean much right now, but I am determined to do the right thing from now on. I want to redeem myself, Larissa, and prove that I can be trustworthy and contribute positively to our mother's legacy. The sincerity in Roberto's words touched Larissa deeply. She had seen her brother as a relentless competitor, but now his words showed a genuine desire to change. Roberto was in a difficult moment and showed a side of him that few people knew. Larissa calmly said, I believe in second chances, Roberto. But if you really want to be part of this legacy, you will need to prove your sincerity with concrete actions. Our business and charity projects need people who are honest and committed. Roberto listened attentively. I understand I don't expect it to be easy, but I am willing to work hard to regain everyone's trust. Larissa gave a faint smile, encouraging him. Start small. Show your dedication every day. If you need help, I will be here to support you. She looked at Roberto attentively, reflecting on his words and what lay behind them. Larissa had faced many challenges since taking over her mother's business and fortune. Roberto's presence at that crucial moment might be a chance for everyone, if he truly had changed. I accept your apology, Roberto, Larissa said. But remember, actions speak louder than words. You need to show that you've changed. Roberto nodded firmly, a sincere expression on his face. I understand. That's why I'm here. I want to join you and work on one of your projects. Honestly. Larissa raised her eyebrows, surprised. Are you serious? You always dismissed my charity work. Roberto lowered his head for a moment, but then looked at her with sincerity. Yes, I admit it was a mistake. Your work is important and makes a real difference. Please, let me help. Larissa studied her brother, noticing a genuine change in him, something she had never seen before. A small smile appeared on her lips, mingling hope with caution. All right, brother, I'll give you a chance. But remember, at the first sign of dishonesty, it will be the last. Roberto agreed, solemnly grateful for the chance. I understand. I promise not to disappoint you. He left Larissa's office, feeling a mix of relief and determination. Roberto knew that regaining her trust and proving he had truly changed would be difficult, but he was ready for the challenge. As Roberto walked away, Larissa reflected on the challenges and opportunities ahead. She had taken on not just the responsibility of the family business, but also the role of guiding her siblings towards a better future. It was a big challenge to stay on the right path and be honest, but Larissa was determined to do whatever was necessary to keep her mother's memory alive. In the following weeks, Roberto threw himself wholeheartedly into a special project for Larissa, building a school for children in great need. Larissa was always around, watching Roberto work with new energy. One day, while walking through the construction site, Larissa encountered Sonia. Sonia looked a bit nervous and asked, Larissa, can I speak with you? Larissa smiled and replied, Of course, what's going on? Sonia, nervously fidgeting with her hands, said, I want to apologize and accept your offer of help. Seeing Roberto work so hard inspired me. I want to make things right now. Larissa's smile widened. I'm glad to hear that, Sonia. There will be a place for you here if you truly want to redeem yourself. Sonia's eyes filled with tears as she hugged Larissa. Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't disappoint you again. Larissa looked at Sonia with affection and said, We're here to rebuild our family. Together, we can make a difference. As Roberto and Sonia worked hard to change and redeem themselves, Larissa continued to manage the business with wisdom and care. The school was turning out beautifully, thanks to everyone's hard work and new enthusiasm. They were becoming a united team, working to fulfill their mother's dream. But the path wasn't easy. Roberto still struggled to leave behind his old habits of always wanting more and manipulation. He frequently found himself tempted to follow his old impulses. On the other hand, Sonia was struggling to regain her self-confidence and wondered if her good deeds were enough to make up for past mistakes. Larissa also faced her challenges. She needed to balance her new responsibilities and guide her siblings. With every step, she remembered the lessons of honesty and compassion her mother had taught her, trying to be the example her siblings needed to follow. Over time, Roberto and Sonia worked hard alongside Larissa. Gradually, the bitterness and greed that had once dominated them faded, replaced by a new sense of purpose and satisfaction. Each day, they grew closer to the children they were helping, and each of their smiles was a reminder of what truly matters in life. Larissa watched her siblings with pride, admiring the transformation she was witnessing. They were facing challenges and rediscovering the value of kindness. Roberto and Sonia were discovering something new about themselves. Before, they used to talk a lot about how to make money, but now they discussed how to improve children's education. They had stopped competing and truly started working together. On a sunny day, Larissa saw Roberto and Sonia helping out at the school. They were laughing, painting murals on the walls, and handing out school supplies to the children. This sight filled Larissa's heart with joy, reminding her of how much they had grown since reading the will. When the volunteer work was over, the three siblings gathered in the school's administration room. Sitting around the table, they exchanged looks of gratitude and understanding. "I can't believe how much things have changed," Sonia said, genuinely smiling. "Larissa, thank you for believing in us and giving us this chance." Roberto, who used to be serious, also smiled with a sense of lightness. "You showed us the way, Larissa. I never imagined I could feel this fulfilled." Larissa smiled, feeling a mix of emotions. "You two did all the hard work. I just gave you an opportunity. It's amazing to see how you took advantage of it." The three were silent for a moment, reflecting on all they had achieved together. Their mother's legacy, which once seemed like a burden, now symbolized hope and renewal. "We know we can't change the past, but we can build a better future," Roberto said with determination. "Let's keep making a difference here. I promise we'll never lose sight of what truly matters." With the same determination, Roberto added, "We'll never stray from the path of integrity again. This school is just the beginning." Larissa felt a lump in her throat, deeply moved by her brother's words. "Mom would be so proud of you," she murmured, her voice emotional. "You are truly her legacy." Thus, united by their transformative experience and dedication to the greater good, the three siblings moved forward. After a year, Roberto and Sonia showed true change and received their share of the inheritance. Together, they continued not only to lead a school for underprivileged children, but also to build a promising future and a new family foundation, grounded in true wealth, generosity, compassion, and honesty. Did you enjoy this story? The channel Universo Yin Palabras thanks you for your company. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with your thoughts. See you next time.